Welcome to a podcast of the Indo-German Center of Sustainability. I am Dr. Uta Ulrich from Kiel University. We will talk about the ecosystem lake, about its exposure, risk and mitigation strategies, and I have Anne Grudzinski from our Federal Agency for Environmental Protection with me. Ms. Grudzinski, could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you. My name is Anne Grudzinski, and since the beginning of this year, I'm head of the Department Lakes at the State Agency for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Areas in Schleswig-Holstein. Before I started at the State Agency, I worked for 12 years in a planning office in Hamburg, which dealt with the investigation and rehabilitation of lakes. And I graduated in agriculture science with a major on environmental science, which sparked my interest on water bodies and water protection.
Since you are the head of the Lake Department, we are of course curious, what are the tasks of this department?
Yeah, since the year 2000, when the European Water Framework Directive came into force, the work of the department has been significantly influenced by this directive. The Water Framework Directive requires a good ecological and chemical status for all surface and coastal waters, as well as a good chemical and quantitative status for groundwater. For surface waters, the focus of the Water Framework Directive lies on the biotic communities. And in case of lakes, we consider 4 communities. These are the phytoplankton, which means microalgae swimming freely in the water. Then the microphytes, the underwater plants, as well as the macrozoobenthos, the benthic invertebrates living on the lake bottom, and the fish. And since the primary production, phytoplankton and microphyte, play a major role in lake ecosystems, these components are monitored regularly, whereas benthic invertebrates and fish are studied more by means of an occasion-based concept. The task of the Department Lakes consists in assigning and performing the monitoring, in maintaining a proper data management and provisioning, as well as developing restoration concepts and measures for lakes that are not in a good ecological condition.
Can you give us an idea how many lakes are there in Schleswig-Holstein, and are they all important or are there some of less importance?
In Schleswig-Holstein we have 73 lakes, which condition we have to report to the EU. These are all lakes with a water surface more than 0.5 square kilometers, but there are several other smaller ponds or lakes. They are not considered for the Water Framework Directive, but they are very important for the biodiversity as well.
Are these little ponds, which are not considered in the Water Framework Directive, probably observed in special or in selected studies on the short term, or don't you have an entire overview about these small ponds which are so important for biodiversity?
Yeah, we only monitor these smaller ones if there are special questions or problems, but not regularly.
Okay, and we just focused on these small ones, but let's get back to the ponds or lakes which are regularly monitored by the Water Framework Directive. And if you summarize the status of these lakes in Schleswig-Holstein, what's your assessment?
Yeah, from the 73 lakes we have to report to the EU, there's only one lake so far that achieves a good ecological status. There are 19 lakes. They are rated moderate and 27 unsatisfactory, and also 15 lakes, they are rated poor.
In comparison to the other federal states of Germany or maybe Europe, do you know or can you tell us if this is the situation everywhere, or is that especially the situation in Schleswig-Holstein?
No, that's all over Germany. Nearly the same, that most of the lakes are or didn't achieve a good ecological status at the moment.
What are the reasons for this poor assessment? Can you give us an overview what the main contaminants are or the main problems?
For the majority of lakes, the cause is an oversupply of nutrients, especially in Schleswig-Holstein as an agricultural state, where almost 70% of the state's area is used for agriculture. Nutrients are the main problem. The majority of lakes are oversupplied with nutrients, and this leads to an increased development of phytoplankton, which increases the turbidity of the water column so that less light reaches the bottom of the lake, which impairs the growth of underwater plants. And however, the underwater plants are an important habitat for macrozoobenthos and fish, so that the entire lake ecosystem suffers from the oversupply of nutrients.
Mrs. Grudzinski, you already mentioned agriculture, and farmers are already a bit annoyed by being blamed all the time for the poor water quality. Is agriculture the only source for nutrients, or are there also other sources?
No, at some lakes the nutrient inputs also come from wastewater. The large wastewater treatment plants are generally technically well equipped and achieve low nutrient concentrations in the effluent. In Schleswig-Holstein, however, there are still many small wastewater treatment plants in the rural regions, mostly simple sewage ponds, which contain high nutrient concentrations in the effluent. In the catchment areas of the 62 natural lakes, whose status must be reported to the EU, 85% of the wastewater treatment plants are small ones, connected to a maximum of 1,000 inhabitants. And these wastewater treatment plants also contribute to increase nutrients inputs to some lakes. And in addition to wastewater treatment plants, rainwater discharges from settlements also play a role in some lakes. For example, water that runs off sealed surfaces such as roads, parking lots, or even house roofs.
I wonder which compounds are included in these surface runoffs. Are that really nutrients?
Yes, from urban areas, for example, dusts from roof surfaces and roads can be carried into water bodies with precipitation. And in addition to nutrients, these can also contain pollutants.
Okay.
Pollutants are released, for example, from building materials or from tire wear from cars.
And now you reported about the situation and the sources. Of course, it's interesting what are the plans of Schleswig-Holstein or what have been the plans of Schleswig-Holstein to work on this topic. What kind of measures have been implemented, or which kind of measures will be implemented in the near future?
Yeah, there are several approaches to reduce nutrient discharges from agricultural land. Firstly, the fertilizer ordinance, which regulates how fertilizers are to be used, has been amended in recent years. And the main focus lies on balancing the nutrient flows on farms. In short, the nutrients balance of a farm must be balanced. Only as many nutrients may be purchased as are resold via agricultural products. Secondly, since 2013, Schleswig-Holstein has implemented the Alliance for Water Protection, a joint project of the Farmers Association and the Ministry of Environment, with the aim to raise public awareness on the topic agriculture and water protection, and to develop mutual solutions for all parties. And another important component is water protection consultancy for farmers. And farmers receive free advice on how to act on consideration with water protection while managing their farmland and avoiding nutrient discharges, for example, through surface runoff. And agricultural consultation has been offered in individual lake catchment areas since 2015 and will be available throughout Schleswig-Holstein from next year.
You reported a lot about special training for farmers or consultancy and also this Alliance for Water Protection. Is that well accepted by all the stakeholders, or is that just like a round table on the paper?
No, I think we have a good acceptance and a good co-working with the farmers in most areas. Yeah, and this is very helpful to start mitigation measures.
And are there more specific measures, especially for the nutrient input or against the nutrient inputs into the lakes?
Yes, the state of Schleswig-Holstein is increasingly trying to buy agricultural land directly bordering water bodies and to extensify it, what means to convert it from arable land to extensive grassland or woodland. And these riparian stripes must have a width of at least 10 meters so that they can effectively retain nutrients. This is a very effective but also expensive measure. And there are only few areas for sale, so it's difficult to realize the purchase. And also many areas in Schleswig-Holstein are drained by drainage pipes or ditches where nutrients cannot be retained. And their efforts are planned for the future to prohibit drainage water discharges directly to lakes, but to allow the drainage to drain into upstream drainage ponds or constructed wetlands in which nutrients can settle. But drainage ponds also requires large areas of land that are not always available near lakes.
Yes, I can see the problem that for these measures there needs to be the option to buy land or convert land into wetlands or drainage ponds. We have been talking about nutrients all the time, but are there further compounds which cause problems in lakes?
Yeah, we are currently looking into the question of how far pesticides and biocides can have an impact on the underwater vegetation of lakes. In some lakes, nutrient inputs have already been reduced to the point where the phytoplankton is in a good condition and the water is clear enough for light to penetrate to the lake bottom. So there are actually good conditions for underwater plants, but they do not develop or not well enough. And it is still unclear why this is the case. Possibilities include a lack of seeds in the soil or disturbance by fish boring in the sediments, or even inputs of pesticides and biocides that may accumulate in the sediments. And several research projects are currently carried out on this topic, and we are looking forward to the results.
If we summarize now the ecological status of lakes in Schleswig-Holstein, we have to admit that we are not at the point we would like to be. There are still a lot of small and inefficient wastewater treatment plants and the fertilization of agriculture who release a lot of nutrients into the lakes. But if we look back to the implementation of the Water Framework Directive, we may have been a bit too optimistic, thinking that we could change the status of a system within a few years, 15 years. And now we have to extend the deadline until we reach this good ecological status again and again and again. So 15 years, as we expected, were not enough. And this shows us that mitigation measures have to be addressed not in the short term or a few years, but rather on the long term. But as a good result, we can state that the collaboration among the stakeholders has increased significantly and that the collaboration works quite well. And in addition, over the last years, the awareness in society for the topic environment and sustainability has increased. But for the future, we still need well-educated people for different activities. For example, to develop suitable restoration measures for a spot. And researchers who monitor and assess the efficiency of these measures. We need people who are able to model and simulate different scenarios of mitigation measures and help with this activity, help the decision makers to find the optimal measure for a spot. And another topic which is very important is the communication. We need people who support the public awareness and who support also participatory approaches. They need to bring people together and guide them in this mutual consent process. So probably we need people like you. And with this, I would like to close the topic Ecosystem Lake in Schleswig-Holstein. And Mrs. Grudzinski, thank you so much for being here with us and for your report about the lake status here in Schleswig-Holstein. Thanks for listening to the IGCS podcast.